The year is 2023. The setting is the County Agricultural Museum, a quiet place on a Tuesday afternoon. Dust motes dance in the shafts of sunlight. The air smells of old wood and polished steel. A man named Arthur Vance stands before an exhibit. Arthur is the regional director for the State Historical Society. He is here to approve a new plaque. He holds a draft in his hand, reading the words. The exhibit is a tractor, an International Harvester Farmall 806, made in 1966. The red paint is faded but honest. The tires are cracked with age. The seat is worn smooth. Arthur reads the first paragraph. It details the tractor's specifications, its diesel engine, its 95 horsepower, its years of service on the Evans farm. He nods. Standard stuff. Then he reads the second paragraph. And he stops. He puts on his reading glasses. He reads the lines again, slower this time. His lips move silently. In the fall of 1997, the plaque reads, the farm's primary tractor, a John Deere 4455, suffered a catastrophic electronic failure. The dealership quoted the repair at $14,000, a sum the farm did not have. With harvest 2 weeks away, Sarah Evans pulled this Farmall from the back of a collapsed barn. It had not run in 15 years. With the help of a neighbor, she rebuilt its engine by hand. That year, this 1966 Farmall, valued at less than $1,000, brought in the entire harvest. It ran for 31 straight days. It never broke down, not once. Arthur Vance stands very still. He looks from the words on the page to the old red tractor. He feels something he can't quite name. A gap had opened in the story of this place. A gap between a $14,000 computer and a simple machine made of iron. A gap between a woman who was told her farm was finished and the machine that disagreed. This is a story about that gap, and about the quietest, most ferocious battle there is. The battle against someone who is certain they know your limits. This channel tells the stories of people who were told no. People who looked at an impossible situation and found a way. If you believe those stories need to be told, subscribe to this channel. Because what happened after that harvest changed more than just one farm. It changed a whole county. Let's go back. Back to 1997. Back to the dust and the worry. Sarah Evans was 24 years old. She stood in the yard of her family's farm. The farm her great-grandfather had bought with cash in 1932. The farm her grandfather had expanded. The farm her father had nearly lost. He had passed away that spring, a heart attack in the east pasture. He left her with 800 acres of good bottomland and a mountain of debt. He had believed in the new way of farming, bigger, faster, more complex. He had traded his father's simple machines for modern marvels. The centerpiece was the John Deere 4455, a beautiful machine. Air-conditioned cab, computer-controlled transmission. It was the symbol of progress. It was also the anchor chained to the farm's finances. The loan payment was due every November, right after the soybeans came in. That year, the harvest was everything. It wasn't about profit. It was about survival. Sarah walked into the machine shed. The big green tractor sat silent. She climbed into the cab. The key was in the ignition. She turned it. Nothing. Not a click. Not a whine. Just the dead, flat silence of a broken circuit. She checked the battery. It was fine. She checked the terminals. They were clean. The problem was deeper. It was inside the machine's electronic brain. A place she couldn't go with a wrench, a place that required a different kind of key, a laptop, and a technician. She made the call. The man on the other end was Frank Miller. Frank was the service manager at the local John Deere dealership. He was a good man, coached Little League, served on the town council. He had known Sarah's father for 20 years. He had sold him the 4455. He spoke with a gentle, reassuring voice. "Don't you worry, Sarah. We'll get you taken care of. I'll be out there myself this afternoon." Frank Miller arrived around 2 o'clock. His service truck was clean, organized. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who understood complex systems. He had been a Deere mechanic for 25 years. He believed in the technology. He saw it as the answer to the farmer's prayers. More efficiency, higher yields, less guesswork. He greeted Sarah with a kind, sad smile. "I'm so sorry about your dad," he said. "He was a good man." "Thank you, Frank," she said. "Let's take a look at this thing." Frank opened the side panel of the tractor. He pulled out a thick cable from his truck. He connected it to a port near the engine. The other end he plugged into a ruggedized laptop. He tapped a few keys. Lines of code scrolled across the screen. Sarah watched, feeling helpless. This was a language she did not speak. Her grandfather could rebuild a diesel engine with his eyes closed. Her father could calibrate a planter to the millimeter. But this box of wires was a mystery. Frank stared at the screen for a long time. He sighed. He shook his head slowly. "Well," he said, "it's not good news. The ECU is fried, completely shot. And it looks like it took out the main wiring harness when it went." Sarah didn't know what an ECU was, but she knew what fried and shot meant. "What does that mean, Frank? In terms of fixing it?" Frank closed the laptop. He leaned against the massive front tire. He looked at her with genuine sympathy, the kind of sympathy that is more painful than anger. "It means we have to replace the whole system, Sarah. The electronic control unit, the harness, all the sensors. We can get the parts in 3 days, but it's expensive." "How expensive?" Frank hesitated. He didn't want to say the number. He felt like he was delivering a verdict, not a quote. "With parts and labor, you're looking at about $14,000. The air went out of the machine shed. $14,000. It might as well have been $1 million. She had maybe $2,000 in the farm's account. The bank wouldn't extend her another loan, not until the harvest was in. Frank saw the look on her face. He saw the hope drain away. And he did what he thought was the right thing, the kind thing. He tried to soften the blow. He tried to protect her. "Look, Sarah," he said, his voice low and earnest. "I've known your family a long time. I watched your dad struggle. This equipment, it's a huge burden. Maybe this is a sign." "A sign?" "Maybe it's time to think about another way. There are developers looking at land out this way. You could sell, pay off the debt, start fresh. You're young. You could go back to school. You don't have to carry this weight." His words were smooth. They were reasonable. They were backed by 25 years of experience. He was a good man, trying to help a young woman avoid a mistake. He was certain, and that certainty was a wall. Sarah looked at him. She saw the kindness in his eyes. She saw the pity. Not anger, not contempt. Something softer, and in some ways, worse. She looked at the giant green machine. It was supposed to be the future, but it felt like a cage. She said nothing. She just nodded. "Thank you for coming out, Frank. I'll think about it." He patted her arm. "You do that," he said. "I'm not going to be the man who sends you a bill that breaks your family's farm. Just give me a call if you decide. But my advice? Let it go." He packed up his laptop. He drove away, leaving Sarah alone in the silence, with a $14,000 problem, and the kind advice of a man who had already decided she was finished. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, not by a rival, but by someone who genuinely believed they were protecting you. Someone who laid out all the logical reasons for your failure. Someone who was just being realistic. It is the most dangerous limitation there is, because you cannot fight it with anger. You can't argue with its logic. You can only disprove it, and that takes time. It takes work. Drop a comment and tell us about a time someone counted you out, because what Sarah did next wasn't logical. It wasn't realistic. It was something else entirely. She walked back to the farmhouse, the house her great-grandmother had kept. The kitchen table was the same, scratched and scarred with the history of a family. She sat down with the farm's ledger. The numbers confirmed what Frank had said. It was impossible. The debt was a steep cliff. The broken tractor was the final push. Selling was the smart move, the sensible move. Anyone would have understood. She closed the ledger. She put her head in her hands, and she thought of her grandfather, a quiet man with calloused hands. He had distrusted complexity. He believed in things you could fix yourself. He had fought with her father over the purchase of the John Deere. "I don't like it," he had said. "Too many things can go wrong that a man can't see. Too many black boxes." Her father had laughed. "That's the future, Dad. You have to keep up." Her grandfather had just shaken his head. He went out to the old barn, the one at the back of the property, and he said a thing she never forgot. "They took everything except the dirt. The dirt is enough. The iron is simple. Trust the simple things." Sarah stood up from the table. She walked out the back door. She didn't go to the new machine shed. She walked past it. She walked down the lane toward the old dairy barn, the one that had been abandoned in the 80s. Its roof was sagging. One wall had collapsed in a winter storm years ago. The doors hung crooked on their hinges. She pulled one open. The inside was dark. It smelled of hay and dust and time. Sunlight streamed through the broken roof, illuminating junk. Old milking equipment, rusted tools, piles of rotten lumber. And in the back corner, under a heavy, oil-stained canvas tarp, a shape. The shape of a tractor. She walked toward it. The tarp was heavy. She pulled it back. And there it was. The 1966 Farmall 806, her grandfather's tractor, the last one he ever bought. He had called it the best machine he ever owned. It sat there, covered in a thick layer of dust and bird droppings. The tires were flat and cracked. The paint was a dull, lifeless red. A mouse nest was tucked inside the engine compartment. It looked like a relic, a piece of history, not a tool, not a solution. She climbed up onto the operator's platform. The seat was split open, the foam spilling out. The gauges were faded. The steering wheel was bare metal, its plastic coating long gone. There was no cab, no computer, no black box, just levers, gauges, pedals, and a big diesel engine you could see, you could touch, you could understand. She put her hands on the steering wheel, and for the first time since her father died, she didn't feel helpless. She felt a flicker of something else. Not hope. It wasn't that grand. It was just the simple, physical reality of the machine. This was a problem she could put a wrench on. This was a language she could learn to speak. The dirt is enough. The iron is simple. She climbed down. She walked back to the house. She picked up the phone. She didn't call the bank. She didn't call a real estate agent. She called Ben Carter. Ben Carter was 78 years old. He lived on the next farm over. He had known Sarah's grandfather his whole life. They had farmed side by side for 50 years. Ben still farmed with old equipment. A Massey Ferguson combine from the 70s, an Alice Chalmers tractor from the 60s. His neighbors called him a dinosaur. Ben called himself debt-free. He answered on the second ring. "Ben, it's Sarah Evans." "I know who it is," he said. "What can I do for you, girl?" "I need your help. I'm going to get the old 806 running. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Sarah thought he might laugh or tell her she was crazy. Instead, he just said 2 words. I'll get my tools. He arrived an hour later in his dusty Ford pickup. He didn't bring a laptop. He brought 2 big, greasy toolboxes and a set of manuals for the Farmall. Their pages were soft and stained with the fingerprints of decades. He didn't say much. He just walked into the old barn and stood before the tractor. Your granddad loved this machine, he said. Let's see if she remembers us. For the next 10 days, they worked, from sunrise to sunset. This was the rebuild. It began with air in the tires. They used a portable compressor that hissed and spat. The old rubber groaned, but it held. Then they drained the fluids. The oil was thick and black, like tar. The diesel in the tank had turned to sludge. The coolant was a rusty soup. They cleaned everything. The fuel tank, the lines, the radiator. They took the engine apart, piece by piece. Ben taught her as they went. This is your injector pump. It's the heart of the engine. This is your turbo. Gives her the breath. This is how you set the valve lash. Listen for the click. It was a masterclass in mechanical reality. No theories, just steel and oil and tolerances. They replaced the gaskets, the belts, the hoses. They bought the parts from a specialty supplier in Ohio. The total bill was $642, cash. They cleaned the mouse nest out of the alternator. They rewired the starter. They put in new batteries. They timed the engine by hand, turning the big flywheel with a pry bar, aligning the marks, feeling for the compression. On the 10th day, it was time. Everything was back together. The fluids were fresh. The fuel was clean. Ben stood on one side of the engine. Sarah climbed into the seat. You ready? He asked. She nodded. Give her a little ether, just a sniff. Then turn her over. Don't flood it. Sarah's hand was shaking. She pushed the throttle forward. She turned the key. The starter groaned. The engine turned over, slow and heavy. Woomph. 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 A puff of black smoke coughed from the exhaust stack. Then another. Come on, baby, Ben whispered. Come on. She turned the key again. Woomph. Woomph. Woomph, chug, chug. The rhythm changed. A shudder ran through the old iron. And then a roar. A deep, deafening, beautiful roar. The Farmall 806 was alive. Thick black smoke poured from the stack, then cleared to a steady gray haze. The whole barn vibrated with the power of the engine. Sarah felt it in her teeth, in her bones. It was the sound of possibility. Ben Carter had a huge, grease-stained grin on his face. He shouted over the noise. See? She never forgot. The word got around the county quick. Sarah Evans was trying to farm with that old relic of her grandfather's. The community split. At the co-op, the talk was skeptical. She's crazy, one farmer said. That thing will never handle 800 acres. It'll break down every other day. She's just delaying the inevitable, said another. She should have taken the developer's money. Frank Miller heard the news. He felt a pang of sadness. He drove past the Evans farm on his way home from work. He saw the old red tractor out in the field pulling a disc. It looked so small, so slow. He shook his head. Poor kid, he thought. She's just too stubborn to see the truth. But there were others who watched with a different feeling. The older farmers. The ones who remembered what it was like to farm without a computer. They saw the 806 running. And they didn't see a relic. They saw freedom. They saw a machine that a farmer could still own. A machine that couldn't be held hostage by a $14,000 black box. They didn't say much. But they started stopping by. One dropped off a spare set of filters. "Just had these lying around," he said. Another showed up with a grease gun. "This one's got a better reach," he mumbled. It wasn't charity. It was a quiet vote of confidence, a recognition of a shared history, a shared knowledge. The harvest began on the 1st of October. Sarah was in the seat of the 806. Ben drove the old Massey combine. It was slow, painfully slow. The new combines could harvest 30 acres in an hour. Ben's old Massey could do maybe 10. The 806 pulled the grain wagon. It didn't have GPS. It didn't have an air-conditioned cab. Sarah wore a dust mask and noise-canceling headphones. She was covered in dirt from dawn till dusk. She learned the language of the machine, the specific pitch of the engine under load, the feel of the clutch, the smell of hot diesel. They worked for 31 straight days, through sun and rain and wind. The big green John Deere sat in the shed, a silent, expensive monument to a different way of thinking. The Farmall never stopped. Its simple, mechanical heart just kept beating. Every night, Sarah would check the fluids, grease the fittings, and she would put her hand on the warm engine block and say thank you. They finished the last field on November 2nd. The grain was in. The elevators were full. Sarah went to the bank. She paid the farm loan for the year. She paid her property taxes. She paid Ben for his time, though he tried to refuse it. And when it was all done, she had $17,000 left, free and clear, her net profit. Contrast math. The Deere dealership wanted $14,000 to fix a computer. Her profit for the entire year was $17,000. If she had fixed the Deere, her net profit would have been $3,000. Not enough to live on. Not enough to prepare for next year. By using the old tractor, she had saved her farm. The numbers were simple, devastating, and they changed everything. Because this is where the story becomes bigger than one farm. This is where a quiet act of defiance becomes a revolution. Let me tell you about the next 25 years. Sarah Evans never bought a new tractor again. She never took out another equipment loan. The fall of 1998, she bought 80 acres of pasture land from a retiring neighbor. Cash. She used the 806 to clear it and plant it in alfalfa. In 2001, she found a Case 1070 tractor at an auction. Another simple, powerful machine from the 1970s. She bought it for $4,000. Cash. She and Ben rebuilt its engine that winter. By 2003, she had a fleet of 4 old, reliable tractors. The Farmall 806, the Case 1070, an Oliver 1855, an Alice Chalmers 190XT. Her machine shed looked like a museum, but it was a working museum. Her repair bills for the entire fleet were less than $1,000 a year. She was teaching herself, learning the old ways. She bought a lathe, a drill press, a welder. She learned to fabricate her own parts. Her neighbors started to notice. The ones who had laughed were now watching her with a new respect. They were struggling. Their new, complex machines were constantly breaking down. A sensor failure could cost $2,000. A transmission computer could cost $10,000. They were trapped on a treadmill of debt and dependency. In 2005, the farm next to hers went bankrupt. The farmer had a brand new fleet of equipment and a debt load he couldn't service. Sarah bought his 400 acres at the foreclosure auction. Cash. She was now farming 1,200 acres. Her operation was one of the most profitable in the county, not because her yields were higher, but because her costs were a fraction of everyone else's. Frank Miller watched from a distance. His dealership was changing. John Deere was pushing new models every year, more technology, more software, more things the farmers couldn't fix themselves. The right to repair was becoming a battle cry. Frank found himself on the front lines of a war he didn't understand. Farmers would come in, angry about a $5,000 bill for a software update. He would try to explain. He would use the company lines, but their faces were hard. He started seeing more old tractors in the fields, red ones, orange ones, green ones from a different era. He saw Sarah Evans at the co-op one day. She was in her late 30s now, confident, quiet. She nodded at him. "Frank," she said. He just nodded back. He didn't know what to say. By 2015, Sarah was farming over 2,000 acres. She had hired 2 full-time employees, young men from the town who wanted to farm but couldn't afford to start. She wasn't just teaching them how to drive a tractor, she was teaching them how to fix one, how to be self-sufficient, how to be free. The quiet witness. Frank Miller saw it all. He saw her name in the paper, honored as Farmer of the Year. He heard about the workshop she was holding, teaching other farmers basic mechanics. His own business was suffering. Fewer new tractor sales. The service department was busy, but the profits were eaten up by expensive diagnostic tools and training. He felt like the world was changing under his feet. The certainties he had built his life on were crumbling. The kindness he had offered Sarah all those years ago now felt like something else. It felt like arrogance. It felt like a mistake, a profound, generational mistake. The year is 2022, 25 years after the harvest that changed everything. Frank Miller is 65 years old. He is closing his dealership. The building has been sold to a national auto parts chain. The John Deere Corporation wanted him to invest $500,000 in a new showroom and service center. He couldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. He spent the last week cleaning out his office, throwing away decades of sales brochures and service bulletins. On the final day, he got in his truck. But he didn't go home. He drove out of town, out onto the county roads. He drove to the Evans farm. He hadn't been there in 25 years. It was transformed. The old farmhouse was beautifully restored. A new, massive machine shed stood where the collapsed dairy barn had been. The yard was neat, organized. He pulled into the driveway and shut off his truck. He just sat there for a minute. He saw a line of tractors parked by the shed. All of them old. All of them immaculate. A big red Steiger, a white Minneapolis Moline, the old Farmall 806. Sarah came out of the workshop. She was in her late 40s. Her hair had streaks of gray. Her hands were stained with grease. She walked over to his truck. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't hostile. She just waited. Frank got out of the truck. He felt old. "Frank Miller," he said, as if she might not remember. "I remember," she said. He looked around at the farm, at the evidence of decades of hard, smart work. "I came to say something," he said. His voice was quiet. "I was wrong. That day. Back in '97. I was wrong." He expected her to say something, to say, "It's okay," or "Don't worry about it." She just stood there, looking at him, letting the words hang in the air. "I thought I was helping you," he continued. "I thought I was being kind. I looked at your situation and I was so sure, so certain I knew how your story was supposed to end." He finally met her eyes. "I'm sorry." Sarah was silent for a long moment. The wind blew across the open fields. Then she spoke. Her voice was not triumphant. It was not angry. It was devastatingly quiet and factual. "You told me I couldn't," she said. "You sounded so reasonable. All you saw was a broken machine and a girl in trouble. You didn't see me." She paused. "You didn't see my grandfather. You didn't see the dirt." Proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind is the loneliest fight there is. Frank had no answer to that. There was no answer. It was the simple, unvarnished truth. She looked over at the big new shed. "I'm starting a co-op," she said, "teaching young farmers how to maintain their own equipment, how to stay out of the debt trap that you helped build. We're having our first class next month." It was not an olive branch. It was a statement of fact, a description of the world she had built in the shadow of his certainty. He just nodded. He got back in his truck, and he drove away. The reckoning was over. It had not been loud. It had not been dramatic. It had been a quiet conversation in a farmyard, and it was the most complete victory imaginable. The legacy of that one decision in 1997 is still growing. The Evans Farm Mechanical Co-op is now a model for rural communities across the country. It's a non-profit. Sarah Evans takes no salary. She has taught over 200 young farmers, men and women who would have been forced out of agriculture. She gives them the skills to compete, the knowledge to be free. One of her first students was a young man named Leo. He had inherited his family's small dairy. He was drowning in repair bills for his new milking parlor. Sarah taught him how to bypass the proprietary electronics, how to use simpler, more robust vacuum pumps. Leo's dairy is now thriving. Last year, he hired 3 people from his town. Another student, Maria, wanted to start a vegetable farm. She couldn't afford a tractor. Sarah helped her find and rebuild a 1950s Farmall Cub, a tiny, simple machine. Maria now runs a successful CSA, a community-supported agriculture program. She provides fresh food for 50 families. The ripple effect. It spreads. In 2018, Sarah established the Evans Family Scholarship. It doesn't send kids to a 4-year university. It pays for tuition at trade schools. For young people who want to become welders, diesel mechanics, electricians. So far, it has paid for the education of 14 students. 14 young people who are now the backbone of their rural communities. The ones who can fix things. The ones who have the knowledge. The policy changes followed. Inspired by stories like Sarah's, the state legislature passed a right to repair bill for agricultural equipment. It was one of the first in the nation. It requires manufacturers to provide farmers and independent mechanics with access to diagnostic tools, parts, and manuals. Frank Miller's old dealership is gone, but 3 new independent repair shops have opened in the county. They are thriving. They are hiring. They are run by people who believe in fixing things, not just replacing them. The triumph was not individual. It became systemic. It was never about one woman or one tractor. It was about an idea. The idea that knowledge is power. That self-sufficiency is the ultimate form of freedom. That the most sophisticated technology is not always the best solution. Today, the 1966 Farmall 806 sits in the county museum. It's not behind glass. You can touch it. You can climb up on the seat and put your hands on the wheel. Last week, a woman brought her granddaughter to see it. The woman was Sarah Evans. Her granddaughter, a girl of 10 named Clara, touched the faded red fender. "Did you really farm with this, Grandma?" "I did," Sarah said, "for a long time." "It's old," Clara said. Sarah smiled. "It's not old," she said. "It's simple. There's a difference." Back at the farm, in Sarah's workshop, a small object sits on her desk. It's a black plastic box, full of intricate circuits and wires. It's the fried electronic control unit from the John Deere 4455. She kept it all these years. It serves as a paperweight and a reminder. A reminder that the most expensive things are not always the most valuable. A reminder of what happens when you let someone else define your limits. A reminder of the day she chose the simple iron over the complex box. The day she chose to trust herself. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is being told they can't. Someone is being shown a spreadsheet, a diagnostic report, a balance sheet. And they are being told that their dream is impossible, that the logical, sensible, reasonable thing to do is to quit. And the person telling them this might be a good person, a kind person, someone who genuinely believes they are helping. This story is a reminder that their certainty is not your reality. Their logic does not have to be your future. Sometimes, the answer isn't in the new and the complex. It's in the old and the simple, in the knowledge that lives in your hands, in the wisdom passed down from a grandfather, in the fundamental truth of the dirt beneath your feet. The dirt is enough. If this story means something to you, subscribe to this channel. We tell the stories of the quiet fighters, the ones who prove the world wrong, not with speeches, but with decades of work. Leave a comment below and tell us about a piece of old wisdom that has helped you in your life. And share this story with someone who needs to be reminded, someone who is standing in front of their own broken machine, someone who needs to hear that they have the power to rebuild, to fight, to win.